Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rave EDC Innovations Transforming the Study Build Process webinar. Today, we will discuss utilizing workflow, automation, and AI in your study build process. Just a few housekeeping items. During the webinar, everyone will be muted, but we encourage you to type your questions into the Q&A panel, and it will either be answered during the session or at the end during Q&A. If you have technical issues, please send your questions via chat, and we will address those immediately. Also, at the end of the session today, we will have a brief 3-question survey. Please make sure to fill that out before signing off. And now, introductions. Our speaker today is Marco Amarin, Medidata's Senior Director of Product Management Study Conduct. Marco has spent the better part of the last 2 decades working in Medidata's professional services organization. And while he held numerous roles over the years, there was only one mission: helping clients and partners extract the most value from Medidata's tools. Over the past 2 years, Marco has taken this extensive experience over to the product team to use the learnings, the successes, the failures, and everything in between to help develop new study conduct tools. And now I'll turn it over to Marco to begin the session. Marco?
Thanks, Krista. Yeah, so that is the truth. I have picked up a lot of scars and bruises along the way, along with, some successes. I always think about the scars for whatever reason. But yeah, the mission here and what we're trying to do with this new tool, this tool we call Medidata Designer, is to take those scars and those bruises and think about all the things that we've learned over the past, scares me to say, 20 years, and make a better study build experience. Now, we have some clear objectives that we are trying to do here with Medidata Designer. And first of all, this is one of the cool parts about my job, that we're talking about study build, just study build, right? We're not talking about EDC and ECOA and RTSM and all these different tools. We're just talking about study setup, and we're treating it like it's its own product, because it is. It's such an important piece of the puzzle. And so we have stated objectives, stated missions, and the important thing is that these drive our decisions every day. Everything that we build into the tool or plan to build into the tool has to deliver on some of these stated objectives here. And when you sort of double click on them and really think about it, it isn't always obvious, what the right answer is. So first of all, when I say something like we want to decrease overall study build timelines, well, a lot of the feedback we often get, and I often hear about many of the different study build screens, sometimes is not thinking big enough. For example, right? People might get, into this sort of this trap of, hey, can we make something more drag and drop, or make, this button a little more, make it a mouse click instead of something that I have to type. And I like those features, and I want those features for our tool, but those aren't necessarily the things that are going to move the needle on a lengthy study build timeline. And so we're taking the opportunity to zoom out and think about what are the things that really contribute to, extending a timeline, or create a lot of bottlenecks or resource constraints. And we're finding that it's not always obvious when we look at it this way, when we're constantly testing ourselves against these objectives. So really important that we have these stated objectives and that we're constantly testing ourselves against them. We're also trying to certainly simplify the study build experience. I'll call out that one there in the lower right because it's important to me. We want this to be, in thinking about the reason why we want it to be simple, we want this to be a tool that new users can start using right away, right? We know that study build is challenging, and there's often a lot of training and investing in the resources to get them up to speed. But we want to simplify that. Now, the catch there is that a lot of times, especially with study build, a lot of the things that simplify or make that experience sort of point and click and drag and drop sometimes frustrate study builders, right? Study builders are funny creatures. They want to get on with their work, and a lot of times the wizardry of the UI sort of slows them down. And funny enough, a lot of the feedback that we get from study builders who have been doing this for a long time is oftentimes like, hey, dumb it dumb it down, right? Don't make it so wizardry. Just give me the, give me the facts and let me sort of get on with my work. That's sort of the spirit of the feedback that we get from, seasoned study builders. So there's a balancing act that we have to do, and I think that's true of all of our products, but it's I think especially true of a tool designed for study builders. So this is the mission, though. This is what we're trying to do. This is the idea. Now, let's talk a little bit about Metadata Designer and what it is. First of all, think of it as almost like a new platform within a platform, right? It's a new home that manages your study build activities. And what that means is it's a lot more than just EDC study build. You can see a long list of different operational tools on the right. EDC is just one of them. Now we're starting with some basics. We're starting with EDC. We're starting with ECOA. So when you're out there listening to different presentations, consuming different metadata materials, you're going to hear like somebody talking about ECOA, and they're talking about Designer. Same thing for EDC. But just want you to know that there's big plans for this tool, and it's going to get bigger, right? It's not just EDC. It's not just ECOA. It's not just the things you see here. Having said that, EDC is obviously a big one for us. It's a big deal. It's been in terms of study build, it's been pretty stable and pretty unchanged for the better part of 20 years. And I know that because I was actually here 20 years ago when we started this new tool called Architect. So it's really actually exciting for me to sort of revisit those early days where Architect and study build was very revolutionary, and the way we approached things was very different, I would say. And a lot of times people were scared of it. Like, is it really safe to do study configuration on the same server that we're actually running production studies? We take that for granted today, but 20 years ago when Architect was born, that wasn't so accepted, right? We sort of transformed the way people think about these things. We moved from database programming to study configuration, and that very much changed the mindset of how people approach study builds. And so we're gonna, again, take another big leap forward with Designer and sort of change the mindset and change the way people approach study builds. What you see laid out here, first of all, importantly, is that we're introducing a new home to capture protocol requirements. And that's what you see sort of depicted in the left there. And the idea is that we want to have one source of truth. We want to have one place where all these different tools, whether it's EDC or ECOA or RTSM, can point to and consume this important protocol related information. Because that's the reality of what actually happens. We are all working against a protocol, whether the system is aware of it or not. What we're doing in Designer is making the system aware of it so that the system is going to help us along. It's going to be aware of what that protocol schedule of activities is. It's going to be aware of how many different events you have and what their target days are. And also, there's some new things around the data, and it's going to be aware of what data is important to the protocol that we want to collect. And again, guide us as we configure these different tools like EDC or ECOA, and ensure that what we're building in those different systems are going to adhere to the protocol. So this is the idea. We're establishing one source of truth, one place to capture these protocol-related thoughts and requirements, and let the system consume from there. The interesting thing about where we're going in general and where we are with Designer is that there's now 3 ways to configure study objects. And what is a study object? A study object is a form or an edit check, an ECOA questionnaire. These are what we call study objects. We now have 3 ways to get these study objects in your study. We can manually build them, which we've always done. We can copy them, presumably from a global library. So that's another way that we can create study objects in our study. And now the new way is with AI, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that's going to be introduced in Designer. But the point is now we have 3 ways to build these study objects in your study. And the interesting thing, and I talked earlier about zooming out and understanding, where the challenges are. The interesting thing about these 3 ways to build objects is that That's no longer the slow part. Building objects. You can build objects very quickly, manually. You can do, you can build a form pretty quickly. Obviously, copying something from a global library, you can do that very quickly. And then obviously using AI to build things is a very quick way to build these study objects. So if I can build these things quickly, how do I get from, something taking a few minutes or let's say a couple hours to build to 10-week study build timelines? That's what we're trying to address with Designer. So Marco, it takes a few minutes to build a form. Does it really? Well, let's do a little test, and I have a little video here to sort of walk us through. This guy in the screen, and please excuse my mess, is going to show us what it looks like to build a form in Designer. So this will be our first sort of taste of what the Designer screens look like. I'm going to show you a couple of other videos, but what we're going to see here is the new system, and it's me sort of putting myself to the test here. How long is it going to take me to build a form? And so you can see I'm going through the steps here. It's a brand new form being built from scratch, right? It's not copied. It's not anything. It's just manually building a form. And in this case, it's actually a lab form. You can see this person on the screen is associating it to the protocol by selecting a protocol activity. And that timer is going. So now Marco on the screen is going to start building a form. And while Marco does that, I'm going to sort of talk through, and you can keep an eye on my progress there down below. The timer is ticking. And my point here is to demonstrate actually how relatively quick it is to build study objects. That's kind of what I want you guys to sort of take out of this little demonstration here. It's not about teaching you what the designer form builder looks like. We'll have plenty of opportunities to do that. But I want us to sort of think about, well, if it really is pretty quick to build study objects, whether I'm copying them from a library or I'm building them manually, what is slowing me down? Why does it take 10 to 12 weeks instead of minutes? And there's a few reasons, right? And we talk about this all the time in our meetings and how we're addressing things in the tool. First of all, protocol complexity. Things are just a lot more complex these days than they ever have been, right? There's different reasons for that, whether it's what we call basket studies and cohort studies with complex visit structures and a lot of dynamics and a lot of things sort of leading to, frankly, just a very complex situation. And so that's about not just building these objects, it's about understanding if these objects are going to be fit for purpose. Yes, I can build a form pretty quickly, but is it correct? Is it going to meet my protocol requirements? Is it going to do what I need it to do? That's a challenge. That takes a lot of time, right? Yes, I've built the form in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, but I now need to meet with many other people to get their input, and that takes a lot of time. Great form, Marco, but you have to meet with somebody from standards, or you have to meet with somebody from the therapeutic area, or you have to meet with somebody from PV and get their input, and then take that input and address things in the system and wash, rinse, repeat, and do it all over again. So it's not just about building the object, it's about getting input from all these different stakeholders. And that leads to the second area of collaboration, right? This is a big challenge for us. And it's just what we do, right? When we build studies, this is a part of the process. We have to collaborate. We have to get input from different people. The reality is many study build tools, including Architect, for many years, really didn't do much to help us with this. We were sort of on our own. Rave Architect helps you build a form quickly, but it's up to you now to sort of manage the process from there. So that's been a challenge that we're trying to address in the system. We're recognizing that it's a lot more than just building an object quickly. It's a lot more than just those mouse clicks, right? Making something drag and drop versus typing it in with your fingers might save you a couple of seconds, but it's not going to move the needle from 10 weeks to 8 weeks, or 10 weeks to 6 weeks, or 6 weeks to 4 weeks, whatever your metric is. So here's Marco, who's building the form here. He's about 3 minutes and 54 seconds in, and he's just about sort of wrapping up. You can see the new way that You can preview the form and you can manage restrictions. There's some really great things. If you're familiar with how Rave Architect handles study build, you're probably delighted to see the form previewer allows you to like browse what the form looks like by different roles. So that's my point here is like we're taking a lot of these little obvious bits of feedback that we've been hearing for many years, and we're addressing them and building them into the system along with these bigger picture things. But again, you see, I built that form in about 4 minutes, right? So minutes, you can build 20 or 30 forms in a couple of hours, let's say. So great, we have new ways of building things with AI. We have what's always been there, things like global library, but how do we really address the things on the screen here? Those manual processes, validation and testing, working with different people, getting their requirements, making sure that it's going to meet their requirements. This is the new challenge going forward. It's no longer about how quick can I actually build that object. It's about how do I manage my study build process so that I ensure that it's going to meet the protocol requirements. And it's also going to, whatever I build is also going to need to work with other surrounding systems. So yeah, there's protocol requirements, there's system requirements, and there's just getting all that human feedback and testing and ensuring that these things are going to work. That is what takes us from minutes to build these study objects to 10 to 12 week timelines. All right, and that's what we're trying to address with this new tool. So there's, I would say, several new ways that we're doing this, that we're extracting value and building a better study build process with Designer. And here's sort of the biggest 5 areas. There's more, but these are the highlights, let's say. First of all, having a collaborative study build process built into the system. So what do I mean by that? All the things I just mentioned, yeah, you can build things, but you have to meet with 5 people to get their feedback, right? You have to get their approvals. Sometimes it's about testing. Yeah, you built an edit check and somebody else needs to test it. This is all process. This is all work that today, again, Architect and other systems don't really help you so much with. Yes, they allow you to build things, but all that process that takes a lot of time and effort, you're on your own. And so we're bringing that into the system and allowing people to manage and capture those things and collaborate in the tool. So things like approvals and being able to capture a comment instead of jotting your comments in an issue log. For those of you out there who may have worked with me along the way, I can't stand issue logs. It's the worst thing. It drives me crazy. When I see an issue log, I cringe. I used to spend a lot of time working through issue logs, and I know a lot of you out there who do this know exactly what I mean. You're sort of cycling through or reading people's comments. It's a lot of repeats. Like, oh yeah, I know. I just read the same issue 4 different times, written slightly different 4 different ways. So these things need to be a part of the system for a number of reasons. Get everybody working on the same source of truth. Stop those repetitive issues from being logged, because if everybody's seeing the same thing, they're not going to repeat it, and just give everybody one place and let the system manage that workflow for us. So that's one thing, one big area that we're addressing and improving and making better. Just like there's a lot of people involved in any study build, there's also a lot of systems involved in any study. We know this. It's not just an EDC system. It's an EDC system that has to work with an RTSM system or an IVRS system or an ECOA system. Any number of things. We all know this. There's different systems that need to work together nicely. And this happens all the time where you make a change in one of those systems and you've now broken 3 other systems, and you're none the wiser, right? Let's say you made a change on a form, you've removed a field or changed the name of a field or slightly changed the format of a field. And it seemed innocent enough and the system liked it. It was happy, didn't give you any red flags or warnings. And you come in the next day and you have a bunch of emails or people from the help desk going, what happened? Something's not working. Why is my report not working? Why is this thing broken? Why am I getting these error messages? We know this. We live through this all the time. It happens all the time. And so we're trying to address that very issue in Designer as well with what we call change impact messaging. And so it's subtle. You're going to start to see this spread through the system in many different ways. And the idea is that as users are making updates or changes to study objects, they're being given information about what impact they're creating right away. A lot of times, especially if you think about an EDC build, something that has a lot of, let's say, functionality with things like edit checks and data validations, a lot of times these changes are not necessarily technical hard impacts. Like, yeah, if I remove a form or a field, yeah, an edit check that needs that form or field is going to break, and that's pretty obvious. But if I maybe move a form from one visit to a different visit, right? Let's say I change the sort of visit schedule a little bit. A lot of times those data validations aren't technically broken. They're still valid from a technical perspective, but because we sort of changed the meaning of that visit structure, we've effectively invalidated an edit check. That edit check might technically still work, but it might have the wrong purpose now, or display the wrong message, or just function in ways that I'm not expecting. These are the subtle changes that we're going to get actually the most value from this change impact system, because we're saying, yeah, no, this is important information. If you move something from one visit to the other, yeah, maybe you didn't break these 5 edit checks, but you might have changed the meaning drastically. So we're bringing that information forward. That's the sort of thing we're building into this change impact system, and you're going to start seeing throughout Designer. And the cool part is it's not just the user who's making the change that's going to see this, although that's pretty cool. Think about it. I'm making a change to a visit schedule. And now I immediately see, oh, by the way, you just broke your RTSM system. That's important information because maybe I want to say, hold on, let me pause, let me go talk to somebody first, or let me not do it. But also the person who's the receiver of the impact. So somebody who's working on that RTSM system is going to get that message saying, hey, the visit schedule changed. And so your thing might not work. So lots of good things coming. We're sort of starting small, but we see a lot of potential, and we've been getting great feedback from this new way of approaching impacts. By the way, that's going to extend to, and it already sort of starts to by inherently, but it extends to production subjects as well. Hey, yeah, go ahead and make that change because you just started your study. That change you're making only happens in visit 5. Like that's a form that only shows up in visit 5, and all of your subjects are only up to visit 3. That's information that we have, that we know, and that we should tell our users, go ahead, make that change. It's not going to impact any patients. You can get that in right away. Or the reverse. Hey, that change is going to impact 3 out of your 5 patients. So be aware that there's going to be implications down the street. That's the sort of thing that's coming through with Designer in this change impact messaging. Better version control. So because we have the workflow built into Designer and we're managing things like approvals and the process, we know when things should be versioned. Yes, you've approved a form, let's say an adverse events form or a physical exam form. Somebody's approved it. Okay, that's an appropriate time to up version that object. So 2 things. We have version control on the individual objects. They're going to be individually versions, and we're going to have that history. But also, we're letting the system manage for us when things should be versioned, right? So there's certain business moments that we know we need to capture or a snapshot or capture a version of something. So the system's going to manage that for us because the system knows the workflow and is managing the workflow for us. Lots of good things coming there. Automated data standardization. So I mentioned earlier that we're capturing protocol requirements in the system. That includes the ability to define what data we want to collect for a protocol. We do this by protocol activity. And so what we're saying is everybody knows what a protocol looks like, and it has, a bunch of events and activities defined for us. We don't necessarily know when we're looking at a protocol what the EDC system looks like, but we know what the activities are and we know what data we want to collect for these activities. And so we have an opportunity in standardized ways to define the data that we want to collect for the protocol. Later on, when users configure things like EDC systems or sensors or questionnaires, they will be aware of that data that's been defined by somebody upstream from me. They will be able to define their thing, their form, their questionnaire against these predefined data sets that have been built into the system. So new ways of handling data is the point. And there's two main areas of value that this is going to introduce for us. First of all, is during the study build process. It's going to give users the ability to centralize and manage what data needs to be collected. And for example, outsource different downstream components. Hey, yeah, somebody else, you build my EDC system, you build my ECOA system. And as a centralized sponsor user, I'm going to know that the data that's going to be collected is going to be conforming to what I've predefined. So it's going to help in my study build. And then also in downstream processes for people who consume data. You want to do some SDTM mappings, or you want to create a patient profile or some sort of report. You know what data to expect well before the EDC system is even built or before the ECOA system is built. You can start your work, you can standardize your work against these predefined protocol data set definitions. Lots to discuss there, lots of detail. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and we're going to have opportunities to work with you guys going forward to get more of that information. Right now, I'm just trying to give you a taste of what's coming. And then I mentioned having a centralized study design and metadata. So a single source of truth, right? A place where I can define things once, and then these downstream systems all sort of consume them. So these are the 5 sort of core value areas that we're, I would say, extracting the most value from. There's more areas and things and features that we're introducing, but these are sort of the 5 main buckets. So I mentioned, hey, we know we can copy things from a global library. That's been around for quite some time, but we also are going to take the opportunity to rethink and revamp, how we manage our global library. And so with Designer, we are going to have a whole new global library system. And the features that I would call out are these 2 in particular. I mean, everybody gets it. We can copy things from a library and reuse them. But the 2 things that I really am excited about is, number 1, being able to define, let's say for a form, which fields are optional. What do I mean by that? If I have a form, and you see an example there on the right, and I have, let's say, 10 or 12 fields on that form, maybe not all the fields on there are required. Some of them are optional. And if a user removes, let's say, the 2 optional fields in their study, they shouldn't break the approval, right? It shouldn't break the approval. It should be sort of an acceptable change and move forward without getting those 5 other people together and reapproving the thing that you just changed, right? Because here's the thing about a global library. Everybody thinks about, when I put something in a global library, that's great because I don't have to rebuild it. And what I always like to call out that is that, no, it's not about the rebuilding. It's not about building things. It's about that I don't have to retest it, that I don't have to reapprove it. That's where the real value of a global library is. We just talked about how you can actually build things in minutes, right? You can build things in minutes. You can build things even faster. Copying and using AI, you can build things quickly. Global library, the value is not about building. It's about testing. So if I consume something from the library and I make a change to it, I don't want to have to gather everybody together and reapprove it or retest it, because that takes a lot of time and energy. Okay, so this is the challenge. How do I give my users the ability to make certain changes, not anything, but some that I deem to be acceptable without needing to assemble 6 people and reapproving? All right, so that's the sort of thing that we're managing. And by the way, you don't have to, right? You can say, no, everything here is required. And so I'm enforcing that. And if something changes, then it'll break the approval. And that's fine. I can manage it that way as well. So that's going to be really helpful. I'm really excited about that. The other thing that I think is going to be really helpful is the ability to package things. So we know that, storing things, different objects like a form or an edit check, that's great. You can reuse it and then assemble it in your study. And that's something that has been going on for many years. But there's bigger value to be had if we can package different object types together for a bigger business purpose, right? Bigger business purpose equals a bigger value. So what do I mean by that? And you can see the example here, a safety package. You're going to have the ability to package different objects together, such as maybe 2 different or 3 different forms together with an edit check or 2 or 3 edit checks, or a safety gateway mapping along with 2 forms and 3 edit checks. Or it could be a questionnaire along with a form, along with an RTSM configuration. And so my point is, it's up to you to build the package, but here's why it matters. Here's why it's important. If I'm somebody who's responsible for my safety system, and I want to ensure that, let's say my safety gateway, if you're using it, it could be some other system, but I want to ensure that the mechanics, the pipelines, the different systems that I have in place, I want to make sure it works. Well, I don't want to have to come in and retest and reapprove everything. If I can say, look, these 4 objects, as long as you have these 4 objects together in your study, I know that my system is going to work. So all I have to look for is that green approved sign. If somebody removes something from that package, even though the individual objects might be fine, they might be approved, my package now lost its approval. Now I know that my safety system is going to break. All right. And so that's the idea of packaging things together. I actually was I was driving along a few weeks ago and I saw a hotel being built, and it resonated with me because what was fascinating about it is, number one, they were doing it very quickly. It was part of my regular drive, and I saw how quickly they were making progress. And the way they were doing it is not by taking standard nails and screws and wood and building it. No, they were taking quote unquote packages. They had entire rooms pre-built. Like, okay, here's a suite, with a king bed and a bathroom, and a kitchenette. And here's one with, 2 doubles. And so they had these packages. That's exactly what we're talking about here, of a higher business purpose equaling to a higher value. And then they were just stacking them. And so the plumber and the electrician does not need to come in and do any work and reapprove something, because they know, hey, if you use this package, I know that the plumbing's going to work. I know that the electricals are going to work. And it's just now about assembling the different packages together to make your hotel. That's exactly what we're talking about here with the new global library. Being able to assemble these packages without getting everybody together and reapproving and ensuring that these things are going to work, right? So I think lots of opportunity there. You're going to be able to build these packages however you want and define your own business purpose for these packages. And because Designer is going to include a lot more than just EDC, right? ECOA, RTSM, safety gateway. You're going to be able to package all these different object types from these different systems in your library together as one package. Okay, so lots coming for our global library. We're really excited about it. It's a lot more, like I said, it's a lot more than just copying things from one place to another. It's, again, zooming out and trying to understand where people are spending the most time so that we can make that better experience. Okay, so we are also introducing a lot of AI capabilities everywhere in our platform, but also in study builds. The time is right, and here's the way I like to think about it. And actually, here was the moment that it really hit me. I actually have a side job. I'm also a landlord. I have these apartments that I rent. It's my quote unquote side hustle, because I don't want to be 75 years old and still talking about SDTM mappings and edit checks. So I have this side hustles that hopefully will one day be my retirement. Anyway, one day I received a bill from the town, my water bill, and it was really high. It was something like $850 or $900, and it's normally $100. And I was like, whoa, why is my water bill so high? It's got to be a mistake. And I called them up, And what they told me was, oh, you have a leaky toilet, and it's been leaking for 3.5 months. It started on July 23rd. They were able to pinpoint the exact date. Um, and so that was an interesting moment for me. First of all, I was like, wow, that's really amazing that you can tell me exactly what's wrong with my house, and be really precise and tell me the exact day that it started. And then after I, got over that moment of amazement, I was really angry. Like, wait a minute, you knew for 3.5 months that I had a leaky toilet and I was just running water, and now I have to deal with this very expensive bill to pay. So I was really intrigued and also really angry at the same time. They had the data, they had the experience, they had the capability to tell me exactly what's wrong with my house from miles and miles away, a leaky toilet. And so as I'm fixing the toilet, I'm just being angry. Now, here's the thing about, how does that relate to what we're doing here? It's exactly the same. So we have the data with respect to study builds. We now have the capabilities and we have the experience. And just like I was angry that the town didn't tell me that I had a leaky toilet, I do not want you guys to be angry at me. How did you know this? You had the data, you had the experience, you had the capability. Why aren't you helping me? So that's where we're at. It's no longer a question of should we, it's we have to. And you're going to be mad at us if we don't. All right. So that's where we're at. We're introducing AI everywhere. We're going to do it. It's already been piloted actually, and you're going to see the first iterations of it come through actually in a couple of months. We're actually really excited about the way we're approaching it too. And I'm going to talk us through what I mean by that. But it's not just a matter of, hey, flood the system with all this AI and let it just build everything and you walk away. It's not that easy. We know it's not that easy. And we've seen people try to do that. Hey, load in a protocol and then it'll just build everything for you. And like I've been saying, the work isn't building things, right? The work isn't just building forms and edit checks. The work is all the stuff that comes after you've built it. Like, now, is it fit for purpose? And that whole workflow. Having said that, here are the areas that we are going to be introducing, and we're actually starting with the third column there, which is edit checks. But we're going to have the ability to load a protocol and have the system automatically create all of those protocol requirements I mentioned, things like schedules of activities, defining the events and activities, that sort of thing. We're going to have the ability to actually create forms, have the system go into global libraries and pre-select forms for us. Build edit checks, and you're going to see an example of this, but enter a user requirement in your own words and have the system build the edit check for you. And then also test those edit checks. So yeah, define test cases and also go into Rave EDC and create patients in the EDC system, enter data, and produce the results all in an automated way. And that's really cool. So we're starting with the third column, edit checks. It's real. It's coming through in April, the first iteration, so it's actually going to happen. And then not only having the ability to enter user requirements and have the system generate an edit check, but it's also going to be able to generate the user requirements themselves, right? By understanding what the protocol is, understanding what the forms are, it's going to actually present proposed user requirements. And I'm going to show you, like I said, some examples of what that looks like. But just talking through how, how is this going to be used? And I believe it's going to be used in two different ways. I know it's going to be used in two different ways in our system. And especially when it comes to things like edit checks. There are things that we do that is just high volume, but very simple, right? We have a lot of edit checks, let's say, that are just simple. Out of any given study with, let's say, 40 forms and 450 edit checks, I don't know, a couple of hundred of those edit checks are very simple. And so for those, there's going to be AI capabilities that'll just build them for you, and you're not going to want to focus on them at all. Just do it. Get it out of my face. It's easy. It's a lot of work because there's a lot of them, but just do it for me. And that's one way that the AI system is going to help us. The other way that the system is going to help us is sort of the opposite, which is things that are a lot more complex and maybe low volume. And the way that we're building it is going to allow users to interact with the system. Because it's highly complex, it's probably not going to get it right, and that's okay. Right? It's like a college kid working on a paper. Hey, let the AI system start it for me, get it started, get a good first draft, and then I'll tweak it. And so that's how you're going to be working with the AI system in more complex moments as well. So it's going to help us in both of those scenarios, high volume, low complexity, but also high complexity, low volume. And the way it's going to do it is very different, or the way you're going to interact with it is very different. So I was interacting with one of these AI tools and trying to create a picture of George Washington dance at a Taylor Swift concert, and I had a certain vision for what I wanted the thing to produce, and it kept getting it wrong. It kept getting it wrong. I didn't want Taylor to be holding the beer. First of all, I wanted George Washington to be holding the beer, and there's other things that I just couldn't get right. But the point is that understanding a user requirement, having a computer system understand a user requirement is hard for a lot of different reasons. And what's going to actually happen, just like I was interacting with this system to just create a simple image, there's learning that happens on both sides of the equation. There's the system learning the way I type and interpreting it and producing something. And that AI system is learning constantly and will get better constantly. But there's also me learning about myself, me learning about my words and how they're being interpreted. So now that I know the way, the system is interpreting my words, and sometimes I say things and I think it knows what it means, and I'm like, no, I have to be a little more clear. That's what we're going to experience with AI systems in general, but also in study build. And it harkened back to years ago when, and I'm showing you some real world examples here, when we actually had a team of study builders that were far away, and they built edit checks for us here at Medidata. I'm going back many years now. And we would provide them with requirements, a data validation specification, and they would give us questions. Now, hopefully build a bunch of edit checks as well. But a lot of the questions were no different than how I interacted with that AI system, right? And you can see the examples here. Here's an edit check requirement that says, if start date is before end date, then open a query. Now that's wrong, right? Why, if start date is before end date, that's valid. Clearly, that's an obvious mistake, right? Really, you want to open a query if the end date is before the start date. And the query message was correct, right? And so the question we would get back from these study builders was like, hey, this doesn't seem right. Can you validate it? And what should just happen is that, hey, you get it. It's obvious. It's an obvious correction. Just correct the thing and move on. This is an example of how AI is going to work. We're going to get a lot of these moments early on where the system's probably going to frustrate us like, hey, this is an obvious thing. Why do I have to now babysit the AI system? What I would say is the AI system is going to get better. Just like these study builders got better over time, they started to learn, how we work. They started to learn that, hey, there's some things that are obvious and I'm going to fix. And there's some things that actually in the second example here, you have two conflicting edit checks. One saying if the subject's under 18, open a query, and then the other one saying if the subject is over 18, open a query. It's a great example of, hey, those study builders didn't even question it. They just saw each requirement separately, built them, and moved on. Same thing for AI. It's probably going to have those moments at first, like, hey, you should know this. These two things are conflicting. The cool part is that once we teach AI once, everybody benefits, right? With the study builders, we didn't have that. Once you teach one study builder, you have to now teach every study builder sort of separately. But that's how this is going to play out. And so to give an example of the system, this is real. We have a POC and we were sort of having different users interact with it. User entered a requirement, clicked generate. And just like I was interacting with that Taylor Swift photo, it's producing test cases and it's giving me the opportunity to correct my requirement. And that's the idea. So not only is it building the edit check, but it's also showing me test cases so that I have the opportunity in layman's terms. I don't need to know how the edit check is actually built. I can read the requirement. I can see the test cases, and that's my opportunity to say, oh yeah, the test case wasn't exactly what I wanted, so let me adjust my requirement and sort of interact with it until it is, what I'm looking for. That's one example of how this is going to play out in the system. Okay, let me just move ahead here. Oh, so the other thing that we're really excited about in how this is going to play out is that because the workflow itself, like I mentioned earlier, is built into Designer, we're going to have the opportunity to control for ourselves how much risk we want to tolerate with this automation. For example, if the system builds an edit check for me or several edit checks for me, I can start to configure, okay, do I want to automate the approval, sort of auto approve things? Or do I want to keep the human in the loop and just ensure that maybe a data manager or somebody comes in and sees what it did and clicks the approve button? We're also going to start to categorize these different edit check types by risk. So there's going to be different things that contribute to that risk calculation. And so you'll have the opportunity to say, hey, the low risk stuff, go ahead and auto approve it. The high risk stuff, maybe I want to approve it. And that's just one example. There's going to be a couple of different ways that users are going to be able to control how much they want to automate and how much they want to keep manual. So it's not just, here you have to use it and it's going to do everything for you. You're going to have the ability to sort of control for yourself how much risk you want to tolerate and how much you want to automate. And here's an example of somebody coming in. There's a summary of where I'm at. They click on the tasks. They see, hey, I have so many forms that need to be approved, or so many forms that need to be built, or that have open comments. And you can see what that lays out like in the screen. Here's all the different forms in my study. Some are approved, some are not. This user is browsing through a demographics form and clicking on the approve button. They're a data manager, as you can see. And that's a general taste of what the workflow looks like and how users can approve things. The other thing I'll call out when we're thinking about AI and using the automations to control our study build, like I said, we're going to control how much of it we want to be automated, how much of it we want to be approved, so that as the system gets better, as the technology gets better, users are going to come into that task summary screen that you saw, and it's going to tell you, hey, here's the things that you need to approve, and here's the things that are ready. What's going to change over time is that list becomes smaller, right? It's not about, hey, I'm doing a totally different thing now. It's about my work is now smaller. I'm going home at 4:30 instead of 7:30. I'm still doing the same things. I'm approving forms or reviewing forms. In this example, I'm approving an edit check, but instead of maybe 30 edit checks that I needed to approve, maybe, it's 20, and then 6 months later, it's 10. And so the number or the amount of work that I'm doing becomes smaller, but the work is very similar. And that is important because we're not creating a lot of disruption. In this example, you see the categories like, hey, this is a low priority, this is a high priority, or because of safety reasons, or because it's primary objective data. And that's how we're going to be able to categorize different things and define which ones should be auto approved and which ones should be manually approved. And so, yeah, it's all about what I like to say is that what we're trying to do is not talk about day one, because I think a lot of people, day one of a study build process, a lot of people jump to, hey, I want to be able to load a protocol, and on day one, it just builds everything. I always like to say, well, what about day two? Because yeah, your automation's built a bunch of things, but I don't know if it's going to work. I need to approve it. I need to do all that hard work that we talked about. I need to assemble 5 different stakeholders and say, is this the form that you need? What do you want to tweak? So I want to talk about day 2 and 3 and 4 and how we're managing that work. And day 2 is what's going to get better over time with these automations. So in 2024, a data manager may log into Designer and see something like this. I have 20 forms that require approval and 200 edit checks. on day 2 of that same study in 2025 may look something like this. Oh, hey, now I only have 10 forms and 100 edit checks. And on day 2 of that same study in 2026, hopefully will look more like this. That's what we're trying to pull off. When I log in, these numbers, even though the size of the study and the complexity of the study did not change, my workload becomes smaller and smaller. So that's what we're trying to achieve with a lot of these automations and the things that we're building into the system. So lots coming through in 2025. Metadata Designer for EDC is actually available now. All the foundational things that we talked about, that workflow, being able to build a complete EDC study is ready. And for people who want to start their adoption journey, we know it's a journey. It's going to take time. You're building in a certain way. You have SOPs, you have processes. So we know it's going to take time for you to transition over to Designer. But yeah, I mean, we can get that journey started, and there's going to be lots of new features and functionality being delivered over the next year and a half, right? We have a release plan that is going to, start introducing a lot of these automations and things, especially around AI. Although, again, the first taste of AI is going to be coming through in April of this year. So the point is, it's real, it's here. We can start our journey, and it's just going to continue to get better. And with that, we'll take some questions if we have. Yeah, we have a few minutes here.
Yeah, we have quite a few questions already in, but feel free to type them in. May not be able to get to all of them live. I know we've got about 8 minutes left. So with that said, let me ask you the first one, Marco.
Yeah.
So will the change impact awareness assessment that's performed by Designer, is it automatic, and does it provide us an impact assessment report to review even before the changes were implemented?
So it is immediate the way the impact messaging works, meaning as the user makes the change in the system, they're getting the immediate feedback of here's the impacts that you've created. Now, having said that, there are certain types of changes that will give you a sort of get out of jail card, if you will. Hey, in other words, it'll say, hey, this change is going to have, a lot of big impacts. Do you want to go back? And you can just at that moment go back, right? There are other changes that are a little more inconsequential and just move ahead, present you the impacts. Now, having said all that, we do not have a report. It's managed in the system. You'll always be able to view these things in the system. They're there along with actual comments. And so that's the cool thing that the system sort of manages for you. You log in and you'll see a list of comments from people like, hey, there's a challenge or there's a problem with this form. Can you fix this? And right alongside those comments from people, you'll have effectively comments from the system. Hey, somebody made a change to the visit schedule and it's impacting your edit check. And so that's the idea, that you'll sort of see your list of things to address, your list of comments. We can make a report. We don't have that on our release plan right now. If we start to get feedback that people really want to see a report out of these things, we can pursue that because the data is in the system. It's just about consuming it.
Great.
Cool.
Thanks, Marco. I just scrolled down the list of questions and I actually saw about 2 or 3 around the same topic, which is really how does Designer and maybe even the AI in Designer, how will that impact custom function programming, the level of it, whether they're needed, etc.?
Yeah, great question. So a couple of different ways. First of all, you saw how the system allows users to type in requirements in layman's terms, right? And so what that means is a person who knows the requirement, not a study builder, but a person who knows the requirement is going to be able to interact with the system to build edit checks. So first of all, What that means is that there's going to be opportunities to define requirements in a way that, hey, I don't care if this thing built 20 edit checks or 30 or 50. The numbers are going to start to be less important. It's going to be about the result. And so what I mean by that is, hey, maybe that would have been a custom function in the past because somebody didn't want to build 50 edit checks and they're going to build a custom function. But if the system's going to do it for me, I don't care if it took 50 edit checks or 5, as long as the result is what I wanted. So that's one way that the custom functions are going to be reduced. The other way is that the AI system is actually going to start interacting with what we call custom function methods. And so what a custom function method is, I don't want to get too technical here, but when you build a custom function, it's a snippet of code and there's different functions within that code. And the AI is going to be able to call those different functions in different ways. And so what that means is that, again, a user entering a requirement in layman's terms, they're not going to care. Why would you care if that requirement led to a configured edit check or a configured edit check that calls on a piece of custom function code? The important thing is that you're getting the result that you want. And so that's another way that, yes, the AI system is going to start to not necessarily, it's not necessarily reducing custom functions, but it's reducing the burden of custom functions on our users, right? And it's actually going to introduce a lot more opportunity. If you think about, this revolutionary world we live on with electric cars, um, because the computer is controlling wheels with electric motors, you can do something like, and you can actually do this in certain cars. You can turn a wheel and have a car completely pivot and rotate in a 360 because the front motors are turning one way and then the back motors are turning in another way. And my point is this, because the user just said turn around, the computer, because it has the ability to control different things at the same time, which humans can't do, it opens up the world of opportunities of what can be achieved. And that's, again, very similar to what we're talking about with respect to edit checks. The user doesn't care if it was 10 custom functions or 2 edit checks, or it doesn't matter. The user is saying, turn the car around, right? Check this data for this thing. This is what I want. And then the AI system is going to go out and build it in the best way. So having said that, look, the custom functions, we're starting small. The configured edit checks is real. That's coming through in April. The ability to control the custom functions, that's going to be coming through, if all goes well, at the end of this year, but probably more like early next year. We'll see. But again, the important thing is that it's just all there. That opportunity is all there. I hope that makes
Yeah,
sense.
great. Thanks, Marco. Probably, yeah, just maybe time for just one last question here. What are the main advantages over using AI to create study objects rather than, versus, using a validated global library?
Yeah. So hard to compete with the global library. And I always have that conversation with our AI team. Like, they talk about how fast they can build things with AI. And I'm like, yeah, but not faster than a mouse click, from a global library. So in terms of just building the object, there's not, global library is faster. Where we're going though with the AI is, yes, being able to build the things that are not in your library, building those things faster, but also the AI is, and this is now an area that the global library does not have, the AI is going to have the ability to define the requirements themselves. The AI is going to have the ability to examine a protocol, examine, let's say, what forms are built, and make decisions like, oh, I get it. That's what you're doing. All right, here's some edit checks that you're going to need to make that happen. And like, that's literally defining requirements for me. And then, oh yeah, by the way, here's the edit checks, here's the requirements. Let me just go ahead and build the edit check for you. And so there's, I think, a lot more opportunity in terms of getting back to the root requirements, which is the protocol, and letting the AI system just automate things directly from that protocol. But, and again, I can't stress this enough, we're keeping the human in the loop because we know the AI is not going to be correct all the time. So that's, to me, the biggest difference.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Marco. We don't really have any more time left now. Thank you, everybody, for hanging on, for the questions and for all the great questions. Apologies if we didn't manage to get to your question.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time.